Which electric vehicle maker is going to win? Tesla, GM, or NIO? And which battery stock is actually better, lithium or hydrogen? I personally don't care because today I'm going to be sharing about two new stocks that I personally have on my watch list that is in the business of building a fully integrated supply chain of high-strength permanent magnets that are actually needed for the entire electrification and sustainability industries. What's up guys, my name is Brandon and today I'm going to be changing pace from the usual tech-focused stocks that I invest in and sharing about two interesting mining stocks that actually mine the rare earth materials that is critical to the success of companies like Tesla and NIO for a future that is actually free from fossil fuels. So let me break down today's video. Part 1, what is rare earth mining and why invest in this industry? Part 2, the two rare earth stock plays that I'm actually leading the race. MP Materials listed in the US and Lynas Rare Earths that is listed in Australia. And part 3, finally, what I'm actually going to do with these two stocks. So let's kick off with what is rare earth mining first, and then why I'm thinking about seriously investing in this industry. So personally, I'm a total noob when it actually comes to mining, and I've never actually invested in this industry at all. So it actually took me a little while to get a decent grip of the whole entire theme and whole entire industry and how it actually works. So let me take you through a quick 30-second science lesson. So the rare earth industry is centered around the whole raw materials used to actually produce magnets. It's not the type that you stick on your fridge, but the magnets that are actually crucial for a number of high-growth, tech-focused commercial industries, including hybrid and electric vehicles, renewable energy such as wind turbines, drones, advanced electronics and robotics, healthcare, and of course, defense technologies. So there's a whole wide range of different industries that actually use these magnets that I'm talking about. Okay, so rare earth elements are a series of 17 chemical elements with specific magnetic properties found in the Earth's crust. So while these elements are actually not that rare, the actual act of digging them out of the ground and particularly processing them from the mined ore is actually extremely difficult, and in fact 80% of the world's current supply is all coming out of China, which, as we all know, is the middle of a lot of geopolitical tensions with many countries. So a little bit more about this later. But the most powerful of these elements is neodymium and praseodymium, also known as NdPr for short. And this is what we're interested in for this video and the stocks that I'll be talking about. Okay, so there's a lot of hype about the whole EV industry, which car maker is going to win, which type of battery maker and that battery chemistry, whether it's lithium or hydrogen, is going to win. But the actual motor technology going into these EV vehicles is pretty well established already and pretty set for the future. This motor technology requires the light rare earths of NdPr that I mentioned to actually make them work. So having an investment and exposure to rare earths is actually a way to have exposure to the entire EV and renewable revolution, and no matter which brand wins or which battery technology actually come out on top eventually. So let's talk about the growing market for EVs, and UBS actually reckon the annual EV sales could grow from about 2 million today to over 17 million by 2025 and to over 36 million by 2030. And as a result, it actually forecasts that NdPr demand will actually triple by 2030. However, as you can see here, when the growth of the EV sales alone mapped against the expected supply currently of NdPr magnets, excluding everything else that need these materials that I mentioned in the other industries, is actually expected to exceed the actual supply by double. And this shows a huge supply gap that could actually result in skyrocketing prices and huge demand for these materials, with different companies competing for it to actually make their own EVs work. In fact, EVs and other growth areas are just 25% of the total magnet market today, with growth positioned to actually explode over the coming decades, like I mentioned. So for example, wind turbines are also expected to grow at a compounded annual growth rate of almost 8%. So as I mentioned, NdPr magnets are critical for a lot of different advanced technologies in different industries experiencing this strong secular growth that are actually going to be powering our future. On top of this, rare earths are also essential to the national defense supply chains of pretty much every single country. This is because the compact and powerful magnets are actually used in applications such as missiles as well as weapons. And it is this which brings me to the next reason why I think this market is actually ripe for investment. So there's such a valuable and widely used commodity, would you actually believe today that 80% comes from actual China itself? They actually have a total grip of the total global supply chain, which is why countries like the US and Japan are actually now scrambling to actually build up alternate supply sources as a key to pretty much national security. So at one time, the US used to be a significant producer of rare earths, and now that there is heaps of US government support to reinvigorate the domestic industry, partly out of strategic concerns, but also significantly towards building a future world where pretty much everything will require rare earths to function. So from this, it can be taken that rare earth space is in line for some pretty exciting things to come in the future years, just on terms of demand fundamentals alone. So let's look at two stocks that I personally have on my watch list at the moment that function and dominate in this space. So like I mentioned, we know this market is huge and it's only going to get bigger. So enter what I think to be the two stocks that are the current global leaders outside of China that are actually scrambling to help ramp up production with commercial as well as government support to hopefully drive their respective market shares higher and also reduce the world's reliance on this stuff coming out of China. And the first stock was newly listed this year through a SPAC and is called MP Materials, ticker symbol MP. Now, the CEO appeared on Mad Money with Jim Cramer on CNBC a couple weeks ago, and they actually called themselves the picks and shovels play for the whole entire EV movement. And since, the stock has actually gone ballistic, almost up to a market cap of just under $6 billion. So let me show you a quick video which gives an overview of their business, which explains it a lot better than I can.
MP Materials has humble beginnings. We acquired this site in 2017. It had 8 employees. It was in care and maintenance. Nobody believed that we could compete against China. Our first stage, which is largely complete, was to relaunch the operations here. We now produce a rare earth concentrate product that represents 15% of the global supply. We are profitable doing so. Our next stage, which is underway, is to make separated rare earth products and optimize it to be a leader in global industry from a cost and sustainability perspective. Once stage 2 is done, we expect to generate a significant amount of free cash flow that will enable us to not just making separated rare earth products, but also magnets, so we can fulfill our mission of restoring the full rare earth supply chain to the United States of America.
Well, we know it's not a lost cause because we're doing it already. The steps that we've taken so far prove that this company and this industry and this site can be successful. We're successfully competing against China now, and we're a low-cost producer in the world.
So they own and operate this site called Mountain Pass in California, and it's the only rare earth mining and processing site of scale in the Western Hemisphere, and currently produces about 15% of the global rare earth supply. So the mine itself has been in production on and off since the 1950s, but was restarted just recently in 2017. Now, like I mentioned before, this stuff is not that rare, but actually processing the stuff is difficult and costly. So this site actually has all the mining and processing infrastructure in place, and MP Materials have actually built a comprehensive plan to eventually become a downstream magnet producer, like the CEO mentioned in the video. Now, the company has also been awarded a Defense Production Investment Agreement by the US Department of Defense to basically establish a domestic processing for separated light rare earth elements, which will actually get the company to completing that 3-stage plan. So their most recent third quarter earnings that they released, which was their first since becoming public, their quarterly revenue increased by 52% year over year to $41 million, driven primarily by a higher realized pricing of the rare earths, as well as a $8.9 million tariff refund received by the company as well. Their adjusted EBITDA increased by over 150% year over year to $11.6 million. Another stock in this space that I'm looking at to gain exposure to rare earths is on the ASX in Australia, and the company is called Lynas Rare Earths, ticker symbol LYC. They used to be called Lynas Corporation, but recently renamed themselves to actually call themselves Lynas Rare Earths, obviously, after everything that I've shared earlier in this video. They have been listed on the ASX since 1986, so they have been around for a while, but back in 2001, they actually sold off their gold division to focus more on rare earths. Today, they have a market cap of about $3.5 billion. Lynas is actually the second largest producer globally of NdPr and is a leading supplier to the free market outside of China. They've also signed a contract with the US Department of Defense as well in July last year to basically proceed with a detailed design of a heavy rare earth separation facility, which they will actually partner with a Texas-based company to actually build eventually. But core to Lynas's business is that they own and operate a rare earths deposit in Mount Weld in Western Australia, and is actually acknowledged as one of the highest grade rare earth mines in the world. They also operate the world's largest single rare earth processing plant currently in Malaysia, and they actually recently just had their license renewed for another 3 years to actually continue their operations there. And as part of their 2025 growth strategy, they've also been expanding their industrial footprint with a planned rare earth processing facility in Kalgoorlie in Western Australia as well. So obviously gearing up to actually take on all that future demand, which I spoke about earlier. So their 2020 results were affected quite drastically by a drop due to a drop in global demand and a shutdown of global production during the pandemic. And that actually resulted in 2 quarters of production halts. But what's important here is that the company is not a new mining play like MP Materials. They've actually been around for decades and have generated revenues of around 300 million a year, positive earnings. So at least a more robust track record than MP Materials. They just haven't had as much hype up that MP has had in the US, which has obviously resulted in their close to doubling of stock price recently. So that leads me on to part 3, what I'm doing with these 2 stocks. So there's a lot of excitement around these 2 stocks, and in particular MP, for companies like Tesla and Apple potentially becoming future customers of theirs. And a lot of this optimism has actually ignited their stock to actually run up at the end of 2020. But it's just run too fast for me to jump in now. And so I've watched the stock initially from the 20s in disbelief as it just basically went all the way up to, I think, $37, $38 a stock. So for now, I'm just going to be sitting on the sidelines, and I'll keep this one on my watch list, and I'll let you know if I actually do pull a trigger on this one. For Lynas, although this stock has already doubled in 2020, it's nowhere near to how hyped up MP has been in the US for me personally. And MP actually has a market cap of almost $6 billion versus Lynas, which is about $3.5 billion. Yet Lynas actually generates over 300 million in revenue versus MP, which only generates about 90 million through the 3rd quarter of last year. And Lynas has an EBITDA of about 60 million versus MP's of about 25 million. Through 3 quarters of the year. So it started to become pretty clear to me that there's a lot of hype in MP and there's a lot more value in Lynas. While it's an exciting play because being in America and supporting American brands, I do think Lynas has a lot more value right now, and I'm likely going to open a position in Lynas over the next month or so. They are established and they have proven to operate profitably over the number of decades, and only now has their respective industry that they've been operating in for over 20 years has actually started to take off with the whole EV movement. So we're all on board with the whole EV movement and with the renewables revolution. It's going to be a massive industry and create a better future for all of us. For me personally, to see a company like Tesla, which is now over $650 billion, I can't personally bring myself to actually chase something like that anymore and invest in something that I don't see that's going to get much bigger at this point in time. But with a company like MP or Lynas, you get exposure to this massive growing industry. You don't have to worry about which automaker or which battery technology will actually win at the end of the day. Either way, you win, plus you're actually supplying other industries with this rare earth magnets, which are actually critical to make them work. So that's it for today, guys. So keep those 2 stocks on your watch list like I have, and I'll be letting you know in a future video if I do proceed ahead to jump in and invest in either of these 2 companies. As always, if you got anything out of this video, hit that like button, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and come on my investing journey. And I hope you have had a good start to 2021, and I'll catch you on the next video. Until next time, see you guys.